I was born a few months after the start of World War II. There was rationing going on. I did not have a doll until I was 6 years old. I remember sweets going off ration when I was 13. In the garden, we had an air raid shelter, which I now know is called an Anderson shelter, set into the ground. So now Dad was not called up for duty because he was disabled somewhat, but he was an air raid warden. So that was his job.
Looking back, Dad probably had Spanish flu back in 1918 or so. He probably had encephalitis, and that left him with a slight limp. He always thought that he had polio, but he never had any wasting of his leg or shortening of his leg, so I very much doubt that it was polio as a young child. But one long-term complication of encephalitis in Spanish flu is Parkinson's disease, and that's what Dad developed later in life in his 70s, and I take that as being possibly a secondary effect of Spanish flu.
I vividly remember having a gas mask put on me. This was just for practice, but I know it terrified me because even now I do not want to go scuba diving, snorkeling. I do not like an oxygen mask on my face. The few times I've had surgery, I come to and I take that mask off because it just terrified me from that day on, having my face covered and feeling not being able to breathe.
Mum loved walking, so I remember when I was young going for lots of country walks with Mum, and she always knew the names of flowers and shrubs and things, which I never do. I suppose I didn't really stick in my memory, and she used to get cross with me for not remembering all these flowers and things.
And it was in our house in Tupwood Lane that Pete had his major accident, reaching up to a jug of coffee that was brewing and spilled the boiling water over his right arm onto his chest.
And my memories of the hospital are of a large ward with lots of beds, and sat on a plank of wood which was over the end of the bath, and the nurses were sort of trying to clean my arm up a bit, and I thought to myself, have I come all this way, all this time, just for them to pick off bits of skin off my arm? Well, as it happened, I didn't know anything about this, but I'm told I was operated on by the great Sir Archibald Mackindoe, reduced the scar on my chin. I remember when Mum ever took me to the doctors, I would be ushered into Dr. Heber, and Mum would say, "This is the doctor that saved your life." And apparently he told Mum and Dad that there was every chance that I wouldn't survive this, and that if I did, there was every chance that my arm wouldn't grow.
So moved to 75 Tupwood Lane, called Windswept, that house, when I was about 6. This was a 4-bedroom house, 1 bath upstairs and cloakroom downstairs. Heating was done with coal fires. We went to a church, which was Plymouth Brethren, which was the other side of Caterham Valley. So we'd walk there every Sunday. One of the members was a greengrocer, and he gave all the kids an orange. And I remember what a treat that was. We got an orange, so it probably 1944 or 1945. I went to a Billy Graham crusade when I was 13, and that's where I was converted. At 18, well, no, before that, I had joined the St. John's Ambulance Brigade.
Usually, Pete and I would go for a walk on Christmas Eve because we were so excited about what was going to happen the next day, and stockings and presents and I don't know what. And then the same people would come for Christmas lunch. There'd be Grandma and Grandpa and Grandad and Grandad Nana, and then Uncle Walter and Mrs. Pearman, and then Auntie Kathleen and Auntie Evelyn, two unmarried siblings of Mum and Dad. And that would be the party year after year after year. Everybody had their own little job to do. So Uncle Walter always heated the huge china dish that Mum had for the turkey. Don't know where she got the dish from, but this needed to be warmed in front of the coal fire in the dining room. And then after lunch, washing up, finished just in time to hear the Queen at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, Queen's Christmas message. And that was the signal after the message for Christmas presents. And they came out from underneath the Christmas tree, and we had our presents. Grandad and Grandpa would probably both smoke a cigar, and I just love the smell of cigars.
Both sets of my grandparents lived in Hawley for all the time that I knew them. We would go visit Nana and Grandad, which was my mother's parents. We'd catch the bus. I think it must have been in the school holidays, and we catch it at the end of Tupwood Lane and change buses at Red Hill. Now, when you got off the bus in Red Hill, there was a bakery right at the bus stop, and they sold the most delicious donuts. So we pick up a half dozen and go down round the corner and catch the bus to Hawley. Now, Nana and Grandad never had a phone, so it was always a surprise when we'd show up. So we'd show up with Nana, and she'd be full of apologies. Oh, of course, I didn't know you were coming. I hope the kids don't mind having fried eggs and chips. Oh, we love fried eggs and chips. Great. Never a problem with us.
Grandad was a blacksmith. He used to shoe horses, but in our time, he'd gone over to ornamental ironwork. And I remember one day I was over in Hawley, and Grandad had been asked to give some lectures to some agricultural students. And he wanted to see if he could teach me how to make a staple. It was great fun. So he got a piece of iron rod. We put it in the fire and beat a point to one end of it, bent it round the horn of the anvil, and then chopped the staple off and sharpened the other prong to it. It was great fun, and Grandad was a great teacher.
We'd play in the garden, which was a beautiful garden. He won many awards for that garden, and had all kinds of flowers growing, not so much vegetables, but some vegetables, because Auntie Evelyn and Auntie Marjorie loved to pick the flowers and decorate hotels and this kind of thing. And everybody's house, they decorated anybody's house that lived near with these flowers.
Grandma and Grandpa and Auntie Kathleen lived in a larger house, Hothfield, close to Hawley railway station. I always thought it was rather an austere house, everything in its place and very clean. In your bedroom, there was a basin and a ewer so that you could have a morning wash. In the bathroom, I always remember a little sign which said, "Never leave the bathroom wet, nor leave the soap still in the water. That's a thing you never oughter." My grandpa had a tobacconist shop, in town. When we were still young, Grandma and Grandpa and Auntie Kathy moved down to Worthing.
My father steered me into nursing, but I got my GCE when I was 16, 17, which was too young to start in the nursing program. I went to St. Mary's in London, by the way, and he thought I needed more exposure to the public. So he got me a job selling ribbons at D.H. Evans on Oxford Street in London. So it was a long commute just to be a sales girl behind the counter. So I think now that was a crazy idea. I could have done the same thing locally, got exposure to the public, learned how to talk to people, but that's where I went for a year. So I started at St. Mary's, London, and got my SRN there, and then stayed on for another year as a staff nurse. I decided I would like to travel. I found that most places abroad would want you to have some midwifery or OBGYN experience. So I enrolled in Cambridge, where I met up with my brother again. Bermuda, that sounds like a nice place to go. So went out there for a year, and pretty soon met Dick, who is now my husband.
I really, really enjoyed my 3 years as an undergraduate, and took advantage of all of the different societies and evening entertainment that you could, clubs that you could get involved in. Our lectures were all in the mornings, 9 until 12, fairly intensive. At the end of our second year, a group of 6 of us traveled out to the Middle East and back again. That was a trip of a lifetime. 2 of our members, Mike and Pam, afterwards went out back to Turkey as missionaries, and they had first got some idea of the church and of the need there in Turkey, and that was one of the ways that the Lord led them to go back full-time later on.
Philip went off to university when I was probably about 4 or 5. So I don't really remember much of the 2 of them being at home very much when I was growing up in Caterham. It was mainly Pete at home, and he was very creative. He was always making something or painting something or tinkering with one of his cars, something like that. But it was a very happy time. I went to a school called South Bank, which was just down the road. Very small school. It only had 3 classes, and there was only about 30 children there, ranging in age from 4 to 11. I suppose one of the highlights of being in Caterham was Liz's wedding. That was a big event, 1964. I was the bridesmaid, and all the wider family got together for that. So that was lovely, and somebody made a film of it, I seem to remember, which we watched afterwards from time to time. And I remember on this film, Auntie Mitchie combing Philip's hair because he'd just come down from Cambridge.
So we got married in England, so he'd never seen England. I'd never seen the States, so we got married in England. And Uncle Jeff officiated, and I tried to found out what was necessary to get licensed in the States. So they looked at my records from Oxford and said, well, this is not a high school diploma. You finished too early. You should have taken the A-levels. So they said, well, sit the high school diploma exam, which I did and passed. Then they said, well, you need to be a citizen to apply to get your license in Arizona. So I said, well, I haven't been here 5 years. I don't qualify. Oh, well, we'll forget that. So go sit the state boards. And by this time we were in Louisiana. So I sat the state boards there and got licensed in Louisiana, started working in Louisiana. And by this time we had Charlotte, our firstborn, and then secondborn was born in Louisiana too. And I started working part-time there. By this time, Dick was flying helicopters out in the Gulf of Mexico.
At the end of my third year at university, I got a job as a counselor at a YMCA camp in New York, USA. And after a couple of months there, I went out to Omaha, where Liz and Dick were at that time, and saw a little of them before coming back to Washington, D.C., Boston, New York, and flying back to England.
And then when I was about 9, we moved to Guildford, and I went to Bushy Hill School in Merrow, which was as far removed from South Bank as you could get, really. Much bigger school. I think there were a couple of hundred kids there. And the facilities, that was the thing that struck me most when I got there, that they had this fully equipped gym and big halls and a kitchen and paper, what didn't seem to be rationed, and loads of art and craft materials. Church was actually much better in Guildford as well, because it was much bigger, and a lot of young people, much livelier, lots of things going on. And so yeah, that was good. Lots of activities. Then when I was 16, I left Guildford because I got a grant to go to Atlantic College, which was an international sixth form college in South Wales, that I got a Nobel Prize there. So I did a chemistry project. We all had to do projects in Project Week in one of our subjects. And I did a chemistry project, and the Nobel Foundation gave a couple of prizes each year to students from the college to go to Stockholm to the actual Nobel Prize giving ceremony. So after Atlantic College, I went to university. I went to Heriot Watt in Edinburgh, and that was probably the happiest time. That was I really enjoyed the course. And Edinburgh is a lovely city to study in. After that, I made the move up to Manchester to do a PhD in pharmaceutics, which is formulation work in pharmacy. And then after a year, I got a job as a lecturer in the pharmacy department, and carried on with my PhD, and met Chris a few years after that. We got engaged at the end of 84 and then married in 85. He was doing a PhD at UMIST.
I was able to take a 4-year training in surgery, and it was during my last year of training that I got engaged to medical students in Canada that I had met. I took 4 months to go to Montreal to study pediatrics there. And after that 4 months, I went down to Toronto and met some students that sent in applications to attend a first international conference of Christian medical students, which I was helping organize. And one of them was Nancy, and I phoned up her mother, and she invited me over for a meal, and I was able to get a position in Toronto as a research assistant for 1 year when we were engaged before we got married. And then after that, 2 weeks after we were married, we set off across with the Queen Elizabeth II, sailed from New York to Southampton, then moved over to Belgium to study tropical medicine, back to England, Bulstrode, in order to do missionary training, and then went out to DR Congo, had our first wedding anniversary on the top floor restaurant of the Intercontinental Hotel in Kinshasa.
always been interested in the sailing. Yes, that's what I want to do. When I grew up, I realised it wasn't the wonderful romantic career that I thought it was when I was 5 or whatever. But anyway, I went sailing and made my own dreams come true. When I first mentioned to Margaret, you know, we could buy a boat and fit it out, buy, you know, just the GRP bit and fit it out. She thought this might be a good idea. So I knew I'd married the right person, didn't I? I thought she'll think this is that absolutely mad idea. And so when we were looking for a house in Godalming, it had to be a house with room for this boat to go in at the side. Yes. And of course, we'd signed a contract to buy it at the Southampton Boat Show, actually, aboard the Sadler 32. When it all arrived, it was just a deck, a hull, and that was about it. And lots of bits of, you know, hatch covers and things sort of thrown in the middle of it. And I put the ladder up against it and climbed in and thought, oh dear, I'm never going to make that look like the boat that I signed a contract with. But yes, they asked me how long it was going to take. And I said, oh, about 3 years. And nodding of agreement there was by a chap from Sadler's, and said, oh, that's realistic. Well, it took 6 years, actually. It had gone back to the factory. They put a keel on it and a mast and put it in the water for us, and we sailed it away from there. When we got out, we had a nice east wind coming out of Poole, spray going everywhere, and we found that we were a shackle missing, and we didn't have any spare shackles, which meant that we couldn't pin the foresail down to the deck, so we couldn't use a foresail. We just had the main and the motor, and I was in my sort of usual clothes, no waterproofs, etc. There was spray going everywhere, bashing into this east wind. The children were being thoroughly sick, so Margaret went down to look after them. I was getting freezing cold and wet, sailing the boat all by myself, and we got into to Lymington, and the kids that had been sick, Margaret took their clothes off and hosed them down with a shower thing, and we got them sort of warm and comfortable and all that. She cooked a meal, and everything seemed better. The following morning, we got a shackle off the guy we were moored up next to, actually. So we were able to use the foresail. We had less wind and a much better direction. And we had a wonderful sail. Each year we took them, everything became easier. And Rob in particular could do more and wanted to do more. In fact, if we said, oh, coming into our harbour or something, you steer, Rob, and we'll put the fenders out, he would duly do this, aged 6 or whatever it was. But then after a while he said, no, I want to do the fenders. You're doing the fenders, I can do the fenders. So whatever we were doing, he wanted to do as well. I think that explains to some extent why he's such a good sailor. I have to say he's a darn sight better sailor than I am, but then he's been doing it all his life.
Well, we're getting to the end of the story. 2000, moving to Cherry Valley on a golf course. So Dick is happy as a lark here, plays golf nearly every day. Have not made one in years.
We have been very active in medical work in DR Congo for most of the last 50 years. Our priority has been teaching young Congolese medical subjects and encouraging a couple of nursing schools and a medical college there. Despite being evacuated 3 times, we've thoroughly enjoyed our time there. You can read about it in the book I've written.
Yeah, but yeah, it's been a great sailing life. Yes, a hobby became a business and has reverted to a hobby again.
Yeah, so in 2014, we moved from Harpenden up to Scotland. Chris got a job at the University of Strathclyde. He's now a professor there. And I got a job in Edinburgh for a short time and then retired from pharmacy. And now I do tutoring in maths and chemistry. And we run an Airbnb. So we have various visitors from all over the place coming to stay with us. We live in a very old listed property with a big garden. So that takes up quite a lot of our energies. Chris is hoping to write a book about the history of the house.